Taylor Swift, singer, songwriter, extraordinaire, as well as one of the biggest names in mainstream media. From having a net worth of over $1 billion, almost 100 million monthly listeners on Spotify alone, and completely sold out tours, she has reached an almost inhuman peak in terms of popularity. On top of all this, she also has one of the most intense and dedicated fan bases of any public figure on the face of the planet. Which is why I'm honestly scared to make this video. However, it's worth it to share the truth with everyone in order to raise awareness on what's really happening. And before you run to the comments to yell at me, please just watch this video all the way through first, as there is a lot in this video that is unknown to the vast majority. If, by the end of this video, you somehow still aren't convinced, then by all means, you can leave your opinions in the comments. Before we begin, I'm splitting this video into various segments in order to better organize the sheer amount of information I'm about to expose, as well as leaving links to all my sources and citations at the end of this video and in the description. Without any further ado, let's begin to tackle the truth behind the single largest public figure in modern American culture. We're going to start off here with one of the most popular topics about Taylor Swift, being the Taylor's versions and the Masters dispute. First things first, we need to evaluate what exactly happened in the first place, as well as Taylor's side of things. So to begin, Taylor Swift signed to Big Machine Records in 2005, who was founded by Scott Borchetta, and was the owner at the time of her signing. Fast forward a decade and 6 whole studio albums later, in November of 2018, Taylor Swift signed a record deal with Republic Records after her Big Machine contract expired. Almost a year later, in June of 2019, she entered into a dispute with her former record label, Big Machine Records. The reason for this was a man named Scooter Braun came in and bought out the record label from Scott Borchetta for $330 million, funded by various private equity firms. Braun had become the owner of all the masters, music videos, and artworks copyrighted by Big Machine, including those of Swift's first 6 studio albums. That is basically the gist of the situation from an outsider perspective. However, there is so much more going on behind closed doors. Before I continue with the scummy things Taylor Swift has done and is still doing, I need to admit where Taylor Swift was actually wronged and in the right. Borchetta and Braun were indeed responsible for preventing Swift from performing her songs at the 2019 American Music Awards, which I agree was not fair to Taylor. However, that is about the only part of the dispute where Taylor is purely morally in the right. Now, it's time to expose Taylor Swift for her manipulative and destructive behaviors she's been demonstrating for the last half-decade. But in order to do that, we need to clear up the definition of the master of a song. The Google definition of a master goes exactly as follows. In music, a master is the original recording of a song or album, and is the source from which all other copies are made. The term includes the recording itself, as well as any post-recording edits or mixes. The copyright for the master recording is separate from the copyright for the song's composition. That's very important. The owner of the master recording has the right to exploit the work, such as by granting licenses to third parties to remix or reissue the recording. So, the masters, to put it simply, are the recordings of the song. Every recording of the vocals and instrumentals is given a record and is categorized as a master. While owning your own masters might be financially beneficial, not owning them does not mean you have zero rights to the song. The common misconception is that this falls more under the umbrella of publishing rights, which is the ownership of the composition and lyrics. Taylor has actually owned her publishing rights all along, and by extension has never not profited off of the old versions because of it. That's right. Dun dun dun! Yeah, Taylor makes money off of all of her old projects still, and always has and always will. She also has almost full rights to all of them, other than the specific ones she signed off when she signed the record deal. Because, think about it, what point would a record label have if they sign an artist but gain nothing from it? Let's do a hypothetical here. Yes, because as a record label owner, we're going to provide promotion, distribution, tour management, legal management, merchandise sales, and providing resources when needed for completely free. No partial ownership of the music is required. I mean, this makes zero sense from a business perspective. Taylor signed the record deal in the first place, where basically you have to sign this piece of paper called a contract that highlights every single detail of the deal. Now, some people will try to defend her in the sense that she was only 15 years old when she signed with Big Machine, which is easily refuted by the role of her father, which I will elaborate more in another section of this video as he plays a key role in all of this. But because she profits off the old versions and owns all of her publishing rights, is why she's still increasingly less interested in devaluing the original versions. For example, with the lyric change on Better Than Revenge, which prompted everyone to compare it to the original, her ownership of the publishing rights is the whole reason she's allowed to re-record and perform these songs. I mean, think about it. Do you think she's allowed to perform songs that don't belong to her? Because she has not been paying Scooter to license these songs the whole time. The re-recordings have been a pointless, gimmicky cash grab from the start. The funny part of all this is, despite Scooter investing a whopping $330 million into the record label, Taylor makes so much more money off the stolen versions than Scooter, whose share of the masters was diluted to virtually nothing years and years ago after multiple subsequent sales. Taylor Swift works under the assumption that her fans aren't keeping track of who owns the masters, which is unfortunately paying off. In terms of the masters that most diehard Swifties are worried about, which at this point is essentially a buzzword, because she can afford to buy the masters back, but hasn't. Which makes you question, why hasn't she? When in fact, you might already be able to piece this together just from the information presented so far in the video, but not owning the masters is way more profitable for her at the moment. But the era's era won't last forever. I wouldn't be surprised if when the Taylor's version hype dies down and she's finished remaking all of her old albums, she'll buy back the masters and then find another way to exploit money from her fans. Even then, diehard Swifties won't admit they're scammed. Unfortunately, they probably see it as a victory for themselves, as much as for her as they always do. When Taylor Swift announced the release of The Tortured Poets Department, her fans scrambled to pre-order the vinyl version of the album, which on its own is extremely normal, as you'll have this virtually with most big artists. But a few weeks later, Swift announced she was releasing another edition of the album, The Bolter, with an exclusive bonus track. Which, again, happens occasionally, but most of the time I just see artists release one vinyl with the bonus song already on it to convince the buyer to purchase the vinyl version instead of just listening to it on streaming services. However, Swifties now had to decide if they were going to drop more money to get the exact same product they already own with one more song on it. Of course, most of them did this, and come a few weeks later, she announced another new edition with another singular exclusive track. And after that, another new edition, and another bonus song. Billie Eilish said herself in an interview with Billboard that artists who release different versions of the same vinyl in order to boost sales are wasteful, which I wholeheartedly agree, but it's also a scummy way to exploit your biggest fans and artificially drive up your numbers. On top of this, she made the decision to release multiple different colored variants of her album Midnights and limited edition pressings in order to get her fans to buy as many of the same product as possible and run up her numbers. When it comes to the Eras Tour, I actually don't have many complaints, as most of the exploitative issues that came here were from companies like Ticketmaster, who were scalping and reselling tickets for insane prices, which she actually addressed, so props to her for that. However, the tour was obviously meant to prey on fans who were so connected to her past eras, which funnily enough, if that doesn't raise a red flag on the whole Masters ownership situation, I don't know what does, because she literally performed songs from all of her eras, including those under the Big Machine label. But honestly, I just call that good marketing and a good business decision on her part. But in terms of music, the whole Taylor's version is the most obvious marketing ploy to get an insane amount of cash for literally recycling the same old song she already knows works, where she hardly has to put in any time, money, or effort. On top of that, she is still making money from the original versions of all the songs and albums. Taylor operates under a 20% revenue share from Big Machine, which might sound low, but the average for major labels such as Big Machine is around 13 to 20%. So Taylor is actually on the highest side of revenue splits, as other labels such as UMG, Sony, and Warner all hover around that average, mostly lower than 20% depending on the deal. And while yes, indie labels typically offer a 50-50 split, do you really think that the label with Tim McGraw, Thomas Rhett, Sheryl Crow, Rascal Flatts, and Brantley Gilbert is a small indie label? The answer, of course, is no. And Taylor received a more than fair share in return for the label literally creating and managing her career. Just like everyone else in the music industry, Taylor Swift is not special. She's just greedy and knows she can play the victim card effectively to get whatever she wants. There are so many artists in worse situations where they not only don't own the masters, but the rights to the music as well, and have much less revenue splits. But you don't see them pulling the same victim card that Taylor Swift does. And her fans, unfortunately, don't see this. They eat up the Taylor's versions, which do give her a much larger revenue share, to be honest, but she could get that same share posting new music instead of recycling old content. But that would take actual time and effort, as well as providing less hype and not allowing her to play the victim. Speaking of new releases though, Taylor Swift has been one to be critically acclaimed in the past, but the only ones seeming to enjoy her new music are her fans. Critically speaking, her new albums are plain lazy. They are purely rushed and pumped out every year solely to sell a whole new line of merchandise to the fans and keep the hype alive. Every move Taylor Swift does is for financial gain, which on its own isn't a problem, but the way she goes about it a majority of the time is ethically atrocious, and it's baffling to see how she can maximize her profit, despite generous industry standards to be honest, by pretending to be the victim of a false problem. However, there's one part to this whole label I have yet to mention, and this even traces way back into her childhood. This key factor is the sole reason for Taylor Swift's original signing and success, and this man is none other than Kanye West. No, I'm just playing, it's her dad, Scott Swift. Scott Swift graduated from the University of Delaware in 1974, the same university as his father and grandfather before him. He entered into the financial business by becoming a stockbroker, in which he then established the Swift Group, a financial advisory group that is part of Merrill Lynch. Merrill Lynch, if you're not familiar, is an American investment management and wealth management division of the Bank of America. So, it's a big deal. When Taylor sought to pursue her career in music, Scott relocated his company to Nashville. He was willing to relocate his entire company to another city just to help his daughter succeed. Despite Taylor Swift referencing that her audience wouldn't survive the asylum she grew up in, she actually grew up in an exceptionally wealthy family with two loving parents who didn't divorce until after she became an adult and established her career. Scott has an estimated net worth of $20 to $30 million from his work as a stockbroker and early career investments and his own daughter, which actually leads us to the main point of this segment. Scott Swift is a shareholder in Big Machine. And not just someone who picked up a few thousand shares on the market, but someone who went as far as to own 3% of the company, which is what he owned as of October 2012, according to what Borchetta told Rolling Stone magazine. There's no real telling how much he started with and if he bought any, but having 3% of the company during the time Taylor was supposedly being mistreated in the label is interesting to say the least. If you're not a big business person, 3% is actually a large sum of shares, especially for a private investor. Scott knew exactly what his daughter was getting into whenever she signed the label deal. After all, he was already a successful businessman and was actually profiting off the decisions made by the label. The whole Taylor's version BS is simply just a ploy to put more money into the pockets of Mrs. Swift herself. All of these lies and delusions are made to distract everyone from the truth that has been happening since she first signed that contract. Which I will give to her is brilliant, but her greed and entitlement from the start, it's been hard to watch to say the least. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, here's the big one. In this last segment, before we wrap up the video here, I figured I'd just mention a few terrible things that Taylor Swift has done / is currently doing that really show the depth of her character, which on top of all this fake victim act and manipulation of her fans makes her all the more unlikable. First off, one of the most famous of her shenanigans is her obsessive private jet flying. In 2022, according to the UK marketing agency Yard, she was listed as the #1 celebrity CO2 polluter that year, with emissions 1,100 times the amount of the average person. All while preaching all of this climate awareness nonsense, which would usually be good advice if she was actually taking it into account for herself. Again, it's very hypocritical and nonsensical for her to be flying as much as she does, but honestly, I could consider forgiving it, if not for the fact that she is constantly taking these short flights to save a minute in travel time, which is just absurd. For example, Taylor Swift's shortest flight taken is allegedly an 8-minute flight on January 30th of 2024. The flight was from Cahokia, Illinois to St. Louis, Missouri, which, by the way, guess how long it would have taken to drive this distance? I'll give you a couple seconds. The answer is 10 minutes. She saved a whopping 2 minutes by taking a private jet. And yes, I understand traffic could be an issue, but even with traffic, at the end of the day, it's a 5-mile drive, which no matter what wouldn't be that much longer. And if this was a one-time thing, that's just another wacky incident, but it's not. And that's where the insanity lies. Another crappy thing is Swift's use of sexism in order to combat criticism. As any art form goes, you're gonna face criticism. Even the most critically acclaimed artists out there have at least a crowd of people who don't enjoy their work. And they deal with it just fine, a majority of the time. Drake. It's no secret that Taylor's music of late has become lazy and repetitive, which repetitive is fine in some cases, but from a music listener's perspective, it gets a little boring listening to the same album be released in different fonts for over a decade straight. However, she alluded to the people's annoyance with her uniform music themes when she accepted the Woman of the Decade award, where she stated how her criticisms were part of the machinery of the sexist music industry. Which is just such a stupid angle, because plenty of other artists are criticized for writing the same songs and repeating themes. Again, here she goes again, playing the victim and placing the blame on others. In other interviews, she even goes as far to specifically point out that male artists are never criticized for writing about love, and how criticizing her for it is a very sexist angle, which, spoiler alert, it's not. Your music is just repetitive, and although I understand you've lived a perfectly wonderful and sheltered life and might not have a ton to write about, I would much rather hear a song about her finding a cool coffee shop than the 100th song about another dude that broke her heart, which on its own leads us to the next quarrel I have with her, because in the 15 years she has been at least 18 years of age, not counting her younger years, she has dated 12 different people. If you don't believe me, here's a full timeline, courtesy of Cosmopolitan.com. July 2008 through October 2008, Joe Jonas. March 2009 through April 2009, Lucas Till. Fall 2009, Taylor Lautner. December 2009 through February 2010, John Mayer. October 2010 through January 2011, Jake Gyllenhaal. July 2012 through October 2012, Connor Kennedy. November 2012 through January 2013, Harry Styles. February 2015 through May 2016, Calvin Harris. May 2016 through September 2016, Tom Hiddleston. May 2017 through April 2023, Joe Alwyn. May 2023 through June 2023, Maddie Healy. July 2023 through right now, Travis Kelce. Wow, what a dating history. Shocks me that she had a single 6-year relationship somewhere in all those little year-long to few month-long flinks, which makes her songs complaining about guys and crying about breakups when it's clear that she is in fact the problem a little bit redundant and a little silly. Which is why I applaud her single anti-hero for at least admitting this in spoken word. Although I understand that really isn't the full point of the song, but seriously, if you can spend over a decade and a half crying about all these evil guys, it is strange to see that you haven't been able to keep but one respectable relationship length when everyone else in the dating scheme seems to be doing just fine. Just a little food for thought. For the last unethical and silly move Taylor Swift's like to pull is the manipulation of the charts. I mentioned this briefly in the video, but now I want to dive a little bit deeper and give some specific scenarios on some of the shady moves she has pulled just to stay on top. When Billie Eilish released her album, Hit Me Hard and Soft, in May of 2024, Taylor saw this as a threat to her streak at #1 on the charts, so to combat this, she immediately released not 1, not 2, but 3 new digital download variants of her 2024 album, The Tortured Poets Department, as well as a new CD version of the album, and restocked 4 limited edition deluxe CD variants. Each variant consisted of a single new and exclusive song, which was only available in that specific version of the album, forcing her fans to purchase numerous copies of the exact same album just to listen to all of her music, which worked as it massively inflated her streaming numbers and wallet, removing any hope for Billie to get a spot in the limelight. This is not the first time she has done this, but is one of the most disturbing ones in my opinion, solely because of the exploitation of her fans. But there's a reason I said one of the most disturbing incidents, because there is one that is even more diabolical. When Brat, the most recent full-length album released from British singer and songwriter Charlie XCX, was about to take #1 spot on the weekly charts, which would wreck Taylor Swift's ongoing record that she had been fighting to hold on to, which includes the influx of versions to beat out Billie Eilish. Taylor fought back again, only this time in the most disrespectful way she has during any of these attempts, with the release of not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, but 6 deluxe reissues of The Tortured Poets Department that was announced at 6:57 p.m. on a Thursday night, each with different additional live versions and voice memos, available only in the UK until 11:59 p.m. that evening, which conveniently enough was the end of the tracking week for the album charts. Obviously, with 6 new releases compared to 1, it was no match for Charlie XCX, and The Tortured Poets Department now stands as Swift's longest-running #1 album in the UK, another personal record broken, and another stats-based marker of success for Swift's trophy cabinet. To finish this last segment off, I just want to add a single, mind-blowing fact. For the viewers at home, comment down below how many total versions of The Tortured Poets Department you think there are. I'll give you a couple of seconds to think here. How many versions of The Tortured Poets Department are there in total? The answer is 36! There are 36 versions of the same exact album, and the fans eat it up every time, allowing Taylor to make an insane amount of money and push other deserving artists out of the spotlight. Well done, Taylor Swift. At the end of the day, sure, there were some shady moves by Scooter Braun and Scott Borchetta, like blocking her from performing at the 2019 AMAs. But let's not ignore the bigger picture. Taylor has always owned her publishing rights and still makes money off of her old songs, while simultaneously re-recording them and playing the false victim to rake in even more money. Her dad also being a large shareholder in Big Machine makes the whole victim narrative even sillier. The re-recordings are a genius way to keep the hype alive while putting money in her pocket with hardly any effort. To add to that, she continues to exploit her fans for even more money through the sale of endless vinyls and multi-edition albums, and it's clear all she cares about is how to keep sucking every last dollar from her fans. And with 36 different variants on her most recent album, it's clear how much she actually cares about her fan base, and not the money and status they provide her with. With all the fake cries to sexism, as well as both environmental and ethical disasters, it is a miracle that she has made it this far with such a dedicated fan base. And at the end of the day, the music ain't even that good. Thank you all so much for watching, and most importantly, leave a comment down below whether you agree, and if this video changed your opinion on her, if you learned anything new, or if you closed your ears the whole video and now hate me because I said mean things about Queen Taylor. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.